seemed to glow in the moonlight. Yasin was captivated, unable to look away. He had found Aisha Kandisha. Aisha Kandisha smiled at Yasin, her eyes glowing with a mysterious light. She beckoned him to come closer, her voice soft and sweet. Yasin felt as though he was in a dream, unable to control his movements. He took a step forward, then another. But as he got closer, he noticed something strange in her eyes, a flicker of something dark and dangerous. For a moment, he hesitated, a voice in the back of his mind warning him to turn back. But Aisha Kandisha's smile grew wider, and the warning faded away. Aisha Kandisha spoke to Yasin in a voice as smooth as silk. She promised him wealth beyond his wildest dreams, a life filled with pleasure and joy. All he had to do was follow her into the depths of the forest, to a place where no one had ever gone before. Yasin, caught up in her words and beauty, agreed without thinking. He reached out to take her hand, and as their fingers touched, he felt a strange warmth spread through his body. It was as if he was being pulled into another world, a world where only Aisha Kandisha ruled. Hand in hand, Yasin and Aisha Kandisha walked deeper into the forest. The trees seemed to close in around them, blocking out the moonlight. But Yasin wasn't afraid. As long as he was with Aisha Kandisha, he felt safe. He didn't notice the shadows growing darker or the strange sounds that echoed through the trees. The deeper they went, the more the forest changed. The trees twisted into strange shapes, and the ground became soft and slippery. But Yasin didn't care. He was under Aisha Kandisha's spell, and nothing could break it. As they walked, Yasin started to feel tired. His legs grew heavy, and his eyes felt like they were filled with sand. He asked Aisha Kandisha if they could rest for a while, but she just smiled and told him they were almost there. Yasin nodded and kept walking, but something inside him felt wrong. The further they went, the more the feeling grew. He tried to ignore it, focusing on Aisha Kandisha's beauty, but the feeling wouldn't go away. Finally, they reached another clearing, but this one was different. The trees were twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching out like claws. The ground was covered in thick black mud that bubbled and hissed, and in the center of the clearing was a large, dark cave. Aisha Kandisha stopped and turned to Yasin, her eyes glowing with an eerie light. She told him that this was the place, the entrance to the world, where all his dreams would come true. Yasin felt a shiver of fear, but he didn't want to disappoint her. Aisha Kandisha held out her hand, inviting Yasin to step into the cave. Her smile was as sweet as ever, but there was something cold in her eyes. Yasin hesitated, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew something was wrong, but he couldn't turn back now. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, his foot sinking into the black mud. As he did, he felt a cold breeze brush against his face, and the sound of Aisha Kandisha's voice faded into the distance. He was alone, standing at the edge of the cave, and he had to decide whether to go on or turn back. Yasin's heart raced as he stood at the entrance of the cave. The darkness inside seemed to stretch on forever, swallowing all light. Aisha Kandisha's voice echoed in his mind, urging him to continue. He glanced back at the forest, where the twisted trees seemed to watch him with unblinking eyes. With a deep breath, Yasin stepped into the cave. The air inside was thick and cold, like a winter's night. His footsteps echoed off the stone walls, each sound growing louder and more ominous. He walked deeper into the cave, the darkness pressing in around him. As Yasin ventured further into the cave, he noticed the ground beneath his feet becoming uneven. The walls narrowed and the air grew colder. Suddenly the floor gave way beneath him, and he fell into a pit filled with sharp rocks. Yasin cried out in pain as he landed, his body bruised and bleeding. But before he could catch his breath, he heard Aisha Kandisha's voice, soft and sweet, calling his name. The pain faded away, replaced by a strange numbness. Yasin struggled to his feet, determined to find her, no matter the cost. Yasin continued through the cave, the path twisting and turning like a serpent. The darkness seemed to have a life of its own, shifting and swirling around him. At times he thought he saw shadows moving in the corners of his eyes, but when he turned to look, there was nothing there. The cave led him into a maze of tunnels, each one darker and more confusing than the last. Yasin tried to remember the way back, but it was no use. The further he went, the more lost he became. But Aisha Kandisha's voice kept guiding him, promising that he was close to the end. After what felt like hours, Yasin stumbled upon a large chamber deep within the cave. In the center of the room stood a tall, ancient mirror, its surface covered in dust. Yasin approached the mirror, wiping away the dust with his hand. As he did, he saw his reflection, but something was wrong. The Yasin in the mirror was older, his face gaunt and hollow. His eyes were dark and empty, filled with a sadness that sent chills down Yasin's spine. He stepped back, but the reflection reached out, as if trying to pull him into the mirror. Yasin turned and ran, desperate to escape the terrifying image. Yasin ran through the tunnels, his heart pounding in his chest. The voices of the shadows seemed to follow him, whispering in languages he couldn't understand. Some voices were soft and pleading, while others were harsh and mocking. But all of them had one thing in common. They were trying to lure him deeper into the cave. Yasin covered his ears, trying to block out the voices, but they only grew louder. His fear grew with every step, but he couldn't stop. He had to find Aisha Kandisha and escape this nightmare. Yasin's footsteps echoed eerily as he stumbled through the dark corridors of the cave. Just as his strength began to wane, he noticed a faint light flickering in the distance. It was a soft, golden glow, like the light of a candle. Hope sparked within him, and he quickened his pace, believing it to be a way out, or a sign that Aisha Kandisha was near. As he approached the light, it moved away from him, always staying just out of reach. Yasin called out, asking who was there. But the only answer was the echo of his own voice. Desperate to escape the darkness, he followed the light, unaware that it was leading him deeper into the maze of shadows. The light led Yasin to a wide underground river that flowed silently through the cave. The water was black as night, its surface smooth and still. On the other side of the river, the light flickered invitingly, as if urging Yasin to cross. He looked around for a way across, but saw nothing but jagged rocks and the dark, endless water. The river was too wide to jump. Yasin didn't trust the water to be safe, but the light beckoned, and the thought of turning back filled him with dread. With no other choice, Yasin decided to wade through the water, hoping it wasn't too deep. Yasin stepped into the water, shivering as the icy coldness seeped through his clothes. The water was deeper than he expected, reaching up to his waist within a few steps. He moved slowly, each step heavy and difficult. The current, though slow, was strong, pulling at his legs as if trying to drag him under. As he neared the middle of the river, something brushed against his leg, sending a shock of fear through his body. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest. But nothing emerged from the water, and after a moment, Yasin forced himself to continue. The light was getting closer, and he was determined to reach it. Just as Yasin thought he was nearing the other side of the river, he felt something cold wrap around his ankle. He looked down and saw a pale, ghostly hand emerging from the water, its grip tight and unyielding. Yasin tried to pull away, but the hand held firm, and he felt another hand grasp his other leg. Panic set in as more hands emerged from the water, pulling him down. Yasin struggled, thrashing wildly, but the hands were too strong. They dragged him under the surface, the cold water filling his lungs as he sank deeper into the dark river. Just when he thought he was lost, the hands suddenly let go, and Yasin found himself lying on the cold stone floor of the cave, gasping for breath. Yasin lay on the floor for a long time, catching his breath and trying to calm his racing heart. The light that had led him to the river was gone, leaving him in complete darkness. He felt a deep sense of despair, thinking he would never escape this cursed cave. But then, as if sensing his thoughts, a new light appeared. This one was softer, gentler, and it illuminated a path that seemed to lead upwards. Yasin felt a surge of hope. Maybe this was the way out. Maybe he could still escape. With renewed determination, he stood up and began to follow the path, hoping that this time, the light would lead him to safety. The path led Yasin to a spiraling staircase carved into the stone. The steps were uneven and steep, and the walls were covered in strange ancient symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light. Yasin hesitated for a moment, but the thought of staying in the darkness pushed him forward. He began to climb, his legs aching with each step. The higher he went, the narrower the staircase became, and the air grew colder. Yasin could feel the shadows closing in around him, whispering in voices too faint to understand. But he kept climbing, determined to reach the top. At the top of the staircase, Yasin found himself in a large circular chamber. The walls were smooth and black, reflecting the dim light in strange patterns. The chamber was empty, but as Yasin stepped inside, his footsteps echoed loudly, as if the chamber was alive with sound. Yasin called out, hoping for a response, but the only answer was the echo of his own voice, distorted and twisted by the chamber's strange acoustics. The sound filled the room, growing louder and more chaotic until it was a deafening roar. Yasin covered his ears, trying to block out the noise, but it was no use. The chamber seemed determined to drive him mad. In the center of the chamber stood another mirror, larger and more ornate than the one Yasin had seen before. Its surface was dark and polished, reflecting the chamber's strange light. Yasin approached the mirror cautiously, fearing what he might see. This time, the reflection in the mirror was not his own. Instead, it showed the image of a shadowy figure, tall and thin, with glowing red eyes. The figure seemed to stare directly at Yasin, its gaze piercing through the glass. Yasin felt a chill run down his spine as the figure raised a hand, beckoning him to come closer. Yasin hesitated, fear gripping his heart. He knew he shouldn't trust the figure in the mirror, but something compelled him to step closer. As he did, the figure's hand passed through the glass, reaching out to him. Yasin took another step, his hand trembling as he reached out to touch the shadowy figure. The moment their hands touched, Yasin felt a surge of coldness that seemed to freeze his very soul. The figure's grip tightened, pulling him closer to the mirror. Yasin struggled to pull away, but the figure's strength was overwhelming. Just as he thought he would be pulled into the mirror, the figure released him, and Yasin stumbled back, his heart pounding in his chest. As Yasin caught his breath, the figure in the mirror spoke, its voice deep and echoing. It warned Yasin that he was on the brink of losing himself to the darkness. The path he was on would only lead to ruin if he didn't turn back. But the figure also told him that there was still a chance to escape, if he had the courage to face his fears. Yasin listened to the warning, fear and uncertainty gripping him. He didn't know who or what the figure was, but its words struck a chord deep within him. He realized that the journey had changed him, made him question everything he thought he knew. But turning back now seemed impossible. The only way was forward, no matter what lay ahead. Yasin stood in the chamber, his mind racing with the figure's warning. The echoing words continued to ring in his ears, turn back, or be lost forever. But there was no clear way back. The path behind him had vanished into darkness, and the figure in the mirror had disappeared, leaving only his reflection. Yasin knew he had to make a choice. He could stay in the chamber, surrounded by shadows and echoes, or he could continue forward, facing whatever challenges awaited him. With a deep breath, he chose to press on, hoping that his courage would be enough to see him through. He exited the chamber and found himself in a long corridor lined with mirrors. Each mirror reflected a different version of him. Some were young and strong, others were old and weary, while some showed him with a look of sadness or fear. It was as if each mirror captured a different part of his life, a different version. As he walked down the corridor, the reflections began to change. They twisted and distorted, showing him with monstrous features or surrounded by darkness. Yasin quickened his pace, feeling a growing sense of unease. The mirrors seemed to be alive, mocking him with every step. At the end of the corridor, Yasin came face to face with a final mirror. This reflection was unlike the others it showed him as he was, tired and afraid, but still determined. The reflection spoke to him in a voice that was his own, but filled with a deep sadness. "You have come far, but the path ahead is more dangerous than you can imagine," the reflection warned. "To survive, you must let go of your fear, your doubt, and your pride. Only then can you find the strength to face what lies ahead." Yasin nodded, understanding the truth in the reflection's words. He had been so focused on surviving that he had forgotten to confront his own fears. He took a deep breath, letting go of the fear that had held him back. With renewed resolve, he turned away from the mirror and continued down the path. Yasin's journey led him to a vast open chamber bathed in an eerie blue light. The air was thick with tension, and the walls were covered in ancient symbols that seemed to pulse with life. At the far end of the chamber, a grand doorway stood, its surface adorned with intricate carvings. Yasin approached the doorway, feeling a strange sense of anticipation. He knew that whatever lay beyond would be a test unlike any he had faced before. The symbols on the door glowed brighter as he reached out to touch it, and the air around him seemed to hum with energy. As Yasin's hand touched the door, it slowly creaked open, revealing a blinding light that forced him to shield his eyes. When the light faded, he found himself standing in a circular room with a tall figure waiting in the center. The figure was clad in ancient armor, its face hidden behind a mask. "I am the guardian of truth," the figure announced in a voice that echoed through the chamber. "To pass through this threshold, you must answer 3 questions. Each answer will determine your fate. Are you ready?" Yasin swallowed hard, but nodded. He had come too far to turn back now. The Guardian's questions would be the key to his survival, and he would need all his wits to answer them correctly. The Guardian raised a hand, and the room filled with a strange, swirling mist. "The first question," the Guardian began, "is about the past. What is the one thing you regret the most, and why?" Yasin hesitated, the weight of his past mistakes pressing down on him. He thought back to his life before entering the forest, to the choices he had made that had led him here. After a moment of reflection, he spoke. "I regret not listening to the warnings of the villagers," Yasin admitted. "I was too proud and too curious, and I ignored their wisdom. My pride led me here, to this place of danger and darkness." The Guardian nodded slowly, acknowledging Yasin's answer. "Pride is a dangerous companion," the Guardian said. "But admitting your mistake is the first step toward redemption. You may proceed to the next question." The Guardian's eyes glowed with an intense light as it asked the second question. "The second question is about the present. What do you fear the most at this moment, and why?" Yasin took a deep breath, searching his heart for the answer. The fear that had plagued him throughout his journey rose to the surface, but now it felt different, more tangible, more real. "I fear losing myself to the darkness," Yasin confessed. "The shadows, the voices, and the illusions have all tried to break me. I'm afraid that if I continue, I will lose who I am and become something I don't recognize." The Guardian regarded Yasin with a solemn expression. "Fear is a powerful force, but it can also be your greatest teacher. You have acknowledged your fear, and in doing so, you have gained strength. The final question awaits. The third question." The room grew silent as the Guardian prepared to ask the third and final question. "The third question is about the future. What will you do if you succeed in escaping this place? Will you return to your old life, or will you seek a new path? Yasin thought long and hard about the Guardian's question. He knew that the journey had changed him, and that returning to his old life might not be possible. But the idea of a new path, a new purpose, resonated within him. I will seek a new path, Yasin answered with conviction. This journey has shown me that there is more to life than what I knew. I want to use what I have learned to help others, to guide them away from the dangers I faced. The Guardian lowered its head as if in approval. You have answered truthfully and with wisdom. You may pass through the threshold, but remember the choices you make from here on will shape your destiny. With the Guardian's blessing, Yasin walked toward the grand doorway, his heart filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. As he stepped through, he felt a strange sensation, as if the air around him was changing. The light grew brighter, and the walls of the chamber seemed to dissolve into nothingness. Yasin found himself standing in a vast open landscape, bathed in the light of 1,000 stars. The sky above was a deep, endless blue, and the ground beneath his feet was soft and warm. It was a world unlike any he had ever seen, and he realized that this was the place Aisha Kandisha had promised a world of dreams and possibilities. But as Yasin took in the beauty of the new world, something felt wrong. The air was too still, the light too perfect. It was as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Yasin looked around, his senses on high alert, and then he saw it, a flicker in the sky, a crack in the perfect illusion. The world around him began to shift and change, the stars dimming and the sky darkening. The ground beneath his feet trembled, and the soft warmth turned to cold, hard stone. Yasin realized with a sinking heart that this was no paradise. It was another trap, another illusion created by the cave to lure him into a false sense of security. As the illusion shattered, Yasin found himself back in the dark, cold cave, the light and warmth gone. He felt a deep sense of despair, but before he could react, he heard a familiar voice, the voice of Aisha Kandisha. She appeared before him, her beauty more radiant than ever, but her eyes were filled with a dark, dangerous fire. "You were so close, Yasin," she said with a sad smile. "But the truth is, there is no escape from this place. You belong to me now, just like all the others who came before you." Yasin's heart sank as Aisha Kandisha's words washed over him. He had been led into a trap, and now he was at her mercy. But something inside him refused to give up. He had faced so much, endured so many trials, and he wasn't ready to surrender just yet. Yasin stood before Aisha Kandisha, his mind racing as he tried to think of a way out. Her beauty was mesmerizing, but now he could see the danger hidden behind her eyes. She moved closer to him, her voice soft and inviting, offering him one last chance to join her willingly. "You have shown courage, Yasin," she whispered. "You could have everything you desire, wealth, power, even immortality. All you need to do is stay with me, and I will make your dreams come true. There is no need to fight any longer." Yasin felt the pull of her words, the temptation to give in and end his struggle. But deep down, he knew that everything she offered was a lie. He had seen through her illusions, and he realized that the only way to truly escape was to confront her, to face the darkness she represented. Yasin took a deep breath, gathering his strength. He looked Aisha Kandisha in the eyes, seeing both the beauty and the danger there. "I don't want your gifts, Aisha Kandisha," he said firmly. "I want to be free. I want to live my life on my terms, not as a slave to your illusions." Aisha Kandisha's smile faded, replaced by a look of cold anger. "Foolish boy," she hissed. "You think you can defy me? No one has ever escaped my grasp, and you will be no different. If you refuse my offer, then you will suffer for your arrogance. Despite the fear rising in his chest, Yasin stood his ground. "I would rather suffer and be free than live a lie," he replied. The words gave him strength, and he felt a sense of clarity, knowing that this was the right path. Aisha Kandisha's eyes blazed with fury as she raised her hands, summoning the shadows around her. The cave grew darker, the walls closing in as if alive. The ground trembled beneath Yasin's feet, and he could feel the darkness trying to pull him under. But he refused to give in. Yasin reached deep within himself, drawing on the strength and courage he had gained during his journey. He focused on the light within his heart, a light that had guided him through the darkest moments. As the shadows closed in, Yasin let out a powerful cry, pushing back against the darkness with all his might. The light within him grew brighter, forcing the shadows to retreat. Aisha Kandisha snarled in frustration, her form shifting and flickering as she struggled to maintain control. But Yasin's determination was stronger, and he began to push her back, step by step. As Yasin fought against the darkness, Aisha Kandisha's beautiful form began to change. Her once perfect features twisted into something monstrous, her skin turning pale and her eyes burning with an unnatural fire. The illusion of beauty was gone, revealing the true face of the jinn, a creature of pure malice and darkness. Yasin felt a surge of fear, but he didn't let it control him. He knew that Aisha Kandisha's power was rooted in fear and illusion, and that as long as he held on to the light within him, she could not harm him. He continued to push back against her, his will unbreakable. The cave shook as their struggle intensified, but Yasin refused to back down. He had come too far to give up now. Aisha Kandisha's power was weakening, her form flickering like a dying flame. Yasin could sense that the end was near, and he prepared himself for the final confrontation. Yasin's fight with Aisha Kandisha led him deeper into the cave, to a place where the darkness was so thick it felt like a living, breathing entity. This was the heart of her power, the source of the illusions and traps that had plagued him. The air was heavy with a sense of despair, and Yasin could feel the weight of it pressing down on him. But he knew that this was the key to defeating her. If he could destroy the heart of darkness, then Aisha Kandisha's power would be broken, and he would finally be free. He focused all his energy on the light within him, using it to pierce through the shadows and find the source of her power. As he moved forward, the darkness grew more intense, trying to smother his light. But Yasin didn't falter. He pressed on, his determination growing stronger with each step. Finally, he saw it, a pulsating black orb at the center of the cave, surrounded by tendrils of darkness that writhed and twisted like living things. Yasin approached the orb cautiously, feeling the immense power radiating from it. The tendrils of darkness reached out for him, but his light held them at bay. He knew that destroying the orb would be dangerous, but it was the only way to break Aisha Kandisha's hold on him. Taking a deep breath, Yasin raised his hand and summoned all the light he could muster. The cave shook as the light grew brighter, filling the space with a brilliant glow. With a shout, Yasin directed the light toward the orb, watching as it struck the dark surface. The orb shuddered, cracks spreading across its surface. The tendrils of darkness thrashed wildly, trying to protect the heart of their power, but it was too late. The light pierced through the orb, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. A deafening roar filled the cave as the darkness recoiled, the shadows retreating into the walls. As the orb shattered, Aisha Kandisha let out a scream of rage and pain. Her form flickered violently, struggling to maintain its shape. The power that had sustained her for so long was gone, leaving her weakened and vulnerable. Yasin watched as Aisha Kandisha fell to her knees, her beautiful face twisted in agony. The once mighty jinn was now nothing more than a shadow, her strength drained by the destruction of the orb. For a moment, Yasin felt a pang of pity, but he knew that she had brought this upon herself. Aisha Kandisha looked up at Yasin, her eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and despair. "You think you've won," she spat, her voice trembling with rage. "But the darkness will always be a part of you. You can never escape it." Yasin met her gaze, his resolve unshaken. "The darkness may be a part of me," he said quietly, "but it doesn't control me. I choose the light." With those words, Aisha Kandisha let out one final anguished scream before her form dissolved into the shadows. The cave grew silent, the oppressive darkness lifting as the last remnants of her power faded away. Yasin stood alone in the cave, the air now clear and still. With Aisha Kandisha defeated, the cave began to change. The walls, once dark and twisted, began to shift, revealing a path that led upward, toward the surface. The light within Yasin grew stronger, guiding him out of the depths and back to the world above. Yasin walked through the cave, his steps sure and steady. The journey had been long and difficult, but he had emerged stronger for it. He had faced his fears, confronted the darkness, and discovered the strength within himself to overcome even the most powerful of enemies. As he neared the exit, Yasin felt a sense of peace settle over him. The weight that had pressed down on him for so long was gone, replaced by a lightness that filled him with hope. He knew that he was finally free. Yasin stepped out of the cave and into the light of dawn. The sun was rising, casting a warm, golden glow over the landscape. The air was fresh and cool, filled with the sounds of birds singing and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. It was a world reborn, full of life and promise. Yasin took a deep breath, savoring the moment. The journey had changed him in ways he couldn't fully understand, but he knew that he was no longer the same man who had entered the forest. He had been tested, pushed to his limits, and had emerged victorious. As he stood there, basking in the light of the new day, Yasin felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had survived the trials of the cave, defeated the jinn, and reclaimed his freedom. But more than that, he had discovered the strength within himself to face whatever challenges the future might bring. With the sun rising higher in the sky, Yasin began his journey back to the village. The forest, once dark and foreboding, now seemed full of life and color. The path that had led him into the depths of the cave was now clear, and Yasin walked with a sense of purpose, eager to return to the people who had welcomed him. As he neared the village, Yasin was greeted by the sounds of children playing and the smell of food cooking over open fires. The villagers, who had feared for his safety, were overjoyed to see him return. They gathered around him, eager to hear his story. Yasin shared his tale, recounting the trials he had faced and the lessons he had learned. The villagers listened in awe, amazed by his courage and determination. The villagers were captivated by Yasin's story. They marveled at his bravery and the trials he had overcome. Some had tears in their eyes as he described the battles with the darkness and the final confrontation with Aisha Kandisha. Others shook their heads in disbelief, amazed that anyone could survive such an ordeal. The village elders, who had warned Yasin about the dangers of the forest, nodded solemnly as he spoke. They understood better than anyone the significance of his journey and the strength it took to emerge victorious. When Yasin finished his tale, there was a moment of silence before the villagers erupted in cheers and applause, celebrating his return. After the celebration, the village elders called Yasin to a quiet place where they could speak privately. They praised his courage and wisdom, acknowledging that he had faced a trial that many would not have survived. But they also reminded him that with great power and knowledge comes great responsibility. "You have seen the darkness that lies within us all," one elder said, his voice filled with wisdom. "And you have learned that the choices we make determine whether we succumb to that darkness or rise above it. You must use this knowledge to guide others, to help them avoid the traps and temptations that nearly claimed you." Yasin listened carefully, understanding the weight of their words. He knew that his journey had changed him, but he also knew that it was not the end. There were still many challenges ahead, and he had a responsibility to use what he had learned to help others. In the days that followed, Yasin found a new sense of purpose. He became a mentor to the younger villagers, teaching them about the dangers of pride, fear, and temptation. He shared the lessons he had learned in the cave, helping them understand the importance of staying true to themselves and choosing the light over the darkness. Yasin also became a protector of the village, using the strength and courage he had gained to defend it from any threats that might arise. The villagers looked up to him, not just as a hero, but as a leader and a guide. They knew that as long as Yasin was there, they would be safe. As time passed, Yasin's story spread beyond the village, becoming a legend in its own right. Travelers who passed through the area would hear the tale of the young man who had faced the jinn and lived to tell the tale. Some would seek him out, hoping to learn from his wisdom, while others came simply to hear the story firsthand. Yasin welcomed them all, sharing his story with humility and grace. He knew that the legend of Aisha Kandisha would live on, but he also knew that the true lesson of his journey was not about the battle with the jinn, but about the choices we make and the power we have to shape our own destiny. One day, a visitor arrived in the village, a woman dressed in simple but elegant robes. She introduced herself as Layla, a scholar from a distant land who had heard of Yasin's story. She had come to learn more about his journey and the lessons he had gained. Layla was not like the other travelers. She was wise and knowledgeable, and as Yasin spoke, she listened with great interest, asking questions that made him reflect even deeper on his experiences. Yasin found himself opening up to her in a way he hadn't with anyone else, sharing not just the events of his journey, but the emotions and thoughts that had guided him. Layla stayed in the village for several days, and during that time, she and Yasin spent many hours in conversation. She shared her own knowledge of ancient lore and the stories of other lands, helping Yasin see his journey in a broader context. She explained that Aisha Kandisha was one of many spirits in the world who tested the hearts of humans, and that his victory was a rare and precious thing. But Layla also warned Yasin that such spirits were never truly defeated, only subdued. The darkness is always there, waiting for those who lose their way, she said. But you have a light within you that can guide others. Never forget that your journey is not over. It has only just begun. As the days turned into weeks, Yasin and Layla grew closer. Their conversations deepened, and Yasin found in her a kindred spirit. Layla, too, was drawn to Yasin's strength and humility, and she admired the way he had used his experiences to help others. The villagers noticed the bond between them and welcomed Layla as one of their own. She became a part of the community, offering her knowledge and skills to anyone who needed them. Together, Yasin and Layla began to work on new projects to improve the village, such as building better defenses and teaching the villagers more about the world beyond their borders. One evening, as Yasin and Layla were discussing their plans for the future, a messenger arrived from a neighboring village. The messenger brought troubling news. A strange illness had begun to spread, and the people there were in desperate need of help. Yasin and Layla knew that they couldn't ignore the plea for help. The neighboring village had always been friendly, and they had often traded with Yasin's village. Without hesitation, they gathered supplies and set out with a group of villagers to offer their assistance. When Yasin and Layla arrived at the neighboring village, they were shocked by what they saw. Many of the villagers were sick, weak, and bedridden. The illness had spread quickly, and no one knew what had caused it or how to cure it. The village healer was overwhelmed, and the people were growing desperate. Layla immediately began to investigate, using her knowledge of herbs and medicine to try to find a solution. Yasin, meanwhile, did what he could to comfort the sick and keep their spirits up. As they worked, they noticed something strange. The illness seemed to affect those who had been near a particular well in the village. Yasin and Layla went to investigate the well, which was located on the outskirts of the village. The well was old and deep, with water that had always been clean and pure. But as they approached, they felt a strange chill in the air, and the water in the well seemed darker than it should be. Layla carefully drew a bucket of water from the well and examined it closely. To her horror, she discovered that the water was tainted with a dark, oily substance that seemed to writhe and shift on its own. It was as if the well had been poisoned by something unnatural. Determined to find the source of the contamination, Yasin and Layla lowered a lantern into the well and peered down into its depths. As the light reached the bottom, they saw something that made their blood run cold. A dark, pulsating mass that seemed to be alive, spreading its poison through the water. Layla recognized the substance as something more than just a natural contamination. It was a remnant of the same darkness that Yasin had faced in the cave, a shadow of Aisha Kandisha's power that had somehow found its way into the well. Layla knew that the only way to cleanse the well was to remove the source of the darkness. But the task would be dangerous, as the substance was highly toxic and could spread further if disturbed. Yasin, however, was determined to try. He suggested lowering himself into the well to remove the mass, but Layla was hesitant, knowing the risks. However, Yasin reminded her that he had faced this darkness before, and that he was willing to do whatever it took to save the village. After much discussion, they agreed on a plan. Yasin would be lowered into the well, equipped with protective gear, while Layla and the other villagers would prepare to seal the well if the darkness tried to escape. With a heavy heart, Layla watched as Yasin was lowered into the well. The air grew colder as he descended, and the darkness below seemed to reach up, as if aware of his presence. Yasin steeled himself, remembering the lessons he had learned during his journey. He knew that fear would only make the darkness stronger. As he reached the bottom of the well, Yasin could see the dark mass more clearly. It pulsed with a malevolent energy, its surface bubbling and shifting as if alive. The sight of it filled him with dread, but he didn't waver. He reached out with the tools Layla had given him, ready to remove the source of the poison. As Yasin attempted to extract the dark mass from the well, it began to fight back. The substance seemed to come alive, lashing out at him with tendrils of shadow. Yasin struggled to keep his balance, fighting against the toxic darkness that threatened to overwhelm him. Above, Layla and the villagers could hear the sounds of the struggle echoing up from the well. They could only wait and hope that Yasin would succeed. Layla's heart pounded with fear for her friend, but she knew that he was strong and courageous. If anyone could defeat the darkness, it was Yasin. Yasin fought with all his strength against the dark mass, but it seemed endless, a living shadow that refused to be contained. Just as he began to feel his strength waning, a memory surfaced in his mind, the light within him that had saved him from Aisha Kandisha's illusions. Drawing upon that inner light, Yasin focused on it, allowing it to fill him completely. The light began to radiate from him, pushing back the darkness that surrounded him. The tendrils of shadow recoiled from the light, hissing as they retreated. Slowly, Yasin felt the mass begin to weaken under the force of his light. Above, Layla and the villagers saw the water in the well begin to clear, the dark substance receding. Layla's heart swelled with hope, knowing that Yasin was succeeding. She urged the villagers to hold steady, keeping the well secure as Yasin completed his task. With the darkness weakened, Yasin carefully extracted the remaining mass from the well, placing it into a sealed container that Layla had prepared. The moment the mass was removed, the water in the well became crystal clear, the last traces of the poison vanishing. Yasin felt a wave of relief wash over him as he signaled to the villagers to pull him up. As he was lifted from the well, the villagers cheered, their gratitude evident in their voices. Yasin emerged, weary but triumphant, holding the sealed container that held the remnant of the darkness. Layla rushed to his side, her eyes filled with pride and relief. "You did it, Yasin," she said softly, her hand resting on his arm. "You saved the village." Yasin nodded, though his thoughts were already turning to what they must do next. "We need to destroy this once and for all," he replied, gesturing to the container. "We can't let this darkness find another way to harm people." Layla and Yasin took the sealed container to a sacred place outside the village. where an ancient fire had burned for centuries, said to cleanse even the darkest of evils. The villagers followed, forming a solemn procession as they made their way to the site. When they arrived, Layla instructed the villagers to gather around the fire. She explained that the flames had been blessed by their ancestors, and that they were capable of purging any darkness that threatened their land. Yasin, still holding the container, stepped forward to complete the ritual, as Yasin held the container over the fire. He hesitated for just a moment. The mass inside seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as if sensing its impending destruction. But Yasin knew there was no other choice. With a determined look, he dropped the container into the fire. The flames roared to life, burning with an intensity that caused everyone to step back. The container and the darkness within it were consumed almost instantly, leaving nothing behind but a few wisps of smoke. The air cleared, and a sense of peace settled over the land. The darkness was finally gone. With the darkness destroyed, the villagers of the neighboring village began to recover. The illness that had plagued them lifted, and the people regained their strength. Yasin and Layla stayed for several more days, helping to rebuild and offering their support as the village healed. During this time, Yasin and Layla grew even closer, their bond deepening into something more than friendship. They shared a mutual respect and admiration, born out of the trials they had faced together. It became clear to both of them that their paths were meant to be intertwined. One evening, as they watched the sun set over the village, Layla turned to Yasin with a thoughtful expression. "Yasin," she began, "I've been thinking about what the future holds for us. We've faced so much together, and I believe there's more we can do, not just for this village, but for others as well." Yasin smiled, understanding "You're right, Layla," he replied. "We've learned so much, and we have the strength to help others who may face similar dangers. Let's continue this journey together, wherever it may lead." With their decision made, Yasin and Layla began to prepare for the next chapter of their lives. Their goodbyes to the villagers, who were sad to see them go. Their calling. The villagers gave them provisions for the journey and wished them well, knowing that they would always be welcome to return. Yasin and Layla set out with a sense of purpose, traveling to other villages and towns, offering their knowledge and assistance to those in need. Along the way, they encountered new challenges and adventures, each one strengthening their bond and teaching them more about the world and themselves. They became known as protectors, wise and kind, but also fierce when confronting the forces of darkness. Wherever they went, they left behind stories of hope and courage, inspiring others to stand against fear and despair. As they traveled, Yasin and Layla heard rumors of a village far to the north that was suffering from a different kind of darkness. The villagers there were being terrorized by a malevolent spirit that had taken control of the local river, causing the waters to rise and flood their homes. The spirit demanded tribute in the form of sacrifices, and the villagers lived in constant fear. Yasin and Layla knew they had to help. They quickened their pace, determined to reach the village before more lives were lost. When they arrived, they found the village in a state of despair. The river had swollen to twice its size, and the villagers were huddled in makeshift shelters, too afraid to approach the water. Yasin and Layla went to the riverbank, where they could feel the oppressive presence of the spirit. The water churned angrily, and a thick mist hung over the surface, obscuring what lay beneath. The villagers watched anxiously from a distance as Yasin and Layla prepared to confront the spirit. Layla began by chanting an ancient incantation, calling upon the protective spirits of the land to assist them. As she chanted, the mist began to clear, revealing a dark, swirling vortex in the center of the river. From within the vortex, a figure began to emerge, a shadowy, serpentine form with glowing red eyes. The spirit hissed in anger, its voice echoing across the water. "Why do you come here, mortals? This is my domain, and you have no power over me." Yasin stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "We come to free this village from your tyranny. You have caused enough suffering. And it ends now. The spirit let out a roar of fury, and the waters of the river surged, sending waves crashing onto the shore. Yasin and Layla stood their ground, their resolve unshaken. The spirit lunged at them, its serpentine body coiling around the riverbank, but they were ready. Layla continued her incantation, strengthening the protective barrier around them. Yasin, drawing on his inner light, summoned a beam of energy that struck the spirit, causing it to recoil in pain. The battle was intense, with the spirit thrashing and striking out, but Yasin and Layla fought with skill and determination. As the battle raged on, the spirit grew weaker, its form becoming less defined. Yasin knew they were close to victory, but they had to be careful. The spirit was still dangerous, and one wrong move could cost them everything. Just as Yasin was about to deliver the final blow, the spirit let out a cry of despair. "Wait," it pleaded, its voice now filled with fear. "Spare me, and I will leave this place forever. I was once a guardian of this river, but I was corrupted by dark forces. I only wish to be free of this curse." Yasin hesitated, sensing the truth in the spirit's words. He glanced at Layla, who nodded in agreement. They had encountered many beings during their travels, and they knew that some spirits could be redeemed if given the chance. "Very well," Yasin said, lowering his hand. "We will release you from your curse, but you must swear never to harm another soul." The spirit bowed its head in gratitude. "I swear it. Thank you, brave one." Layla completed the ritual to cleanse the spirit, chanting softly as she scattered sacred herbs into the river. The spirit's form began to dissolve, the dark energy that had corrupted it lifting away like a mist. The river, once turbulent and angry, became calm and clear, its waters returning to their natural state. As the last of the darkness faded, the spirit's true form was revealed, a graceful, shimmering creature that radiated peace and serenity. It bowed once more to Yasin and Layla before disappearing into the water, leaving the river and the village free from its influence. The villagers, who had watched the entire battle in awe, rushed forward to thank Yasin and Layla. They were overjoyed to see their river restored and their lives returned to normal. Once again, Yasin and Layla had brought hope to a place that had been consumed by fear. After the victory over the river spirit, Yasin and Layla took a moment to rest and reflect on their journey. The villagers celebrated their newfound peace, offering Yasin and Layla gifts and thanks. But even as they rested, the two knew that their journey was far from over. One evening, as they sat by a campfire, Layla brought up something that had been on her mind. "Yasin, our work here has made a difference, but I can't shake the feeling that there is something more we're meant to do. The darkness we've faced is not isolated. It's part of a greater force that we haven't yet uncovered." Yasin nodded thoughtfully. "I've felt it too. Each battle we've fought seems to be connected somehow, as if the darkness is spreading, testing the strength of the light. We need to find the source of this darkness and put an end to it once and for all." With this realization, they decided to embark on a new quest to discover the origin of the darkness that had tainted the spirits and threatened the villages. They knew it would be a dangerous journey, but they were determined to bring peace to the land. As Yasin and Layla set out on their new quest, they noticed signs that the darkness was indeed spreading. The skies seemed to grow darker, storms more frequent, and animals behaved strangely, as if sensing a great disturbance in the natural order. Villagers in the towns they passed through spoke of strange happenings and omens of doom. Their journey took them to remote areas, deep forests, and desolate mountains, where they searched for clues about the origin of the darkness. Along the way, they encountered other travelers who had heard of their deeds and sought their help. Each encounter added to their knowledge and prepared them for the challenges ahead. One night, as they camped in a dense forest, they were approached by an old hermit who had been living in isolation. The hermit claimed to know of a place where the darkness was strongest, a place feared by all who knew of it. The Shadow Valley, a cursed land where no light could penetrate. The hermit, His eyes, clouded with age but still sharp with wisdom, told Yasin and Layla the story of the Shadow Valley. It was once a beautiful and fertile land, but long ago, a great evil had descended upon it. The land was consumed by darkness, and the valley became a place of nightmares where no one dared to venture. The darkness there is unlike anything you've faced before, the hermit warned. It is ancient, powerful, and relentless. Many have tried to cleanse the valley, but all have failed. If you choose to go, you must be prepared for the greatest battle of your lives. Yasin and Layla listened carefully, understanding the gravity of the hermit's words. They knew that the Shadow Valley might hold the answers they sought, but it also posed the greatest danger they had ever faced. Despite the risks, they were resolute in their decision to confront the darkness. With the hermit's guidance, Yasin and Layla began their journey to the Shadow Valley. The path was treacherous, winding through rugged mountains and dense forests. The air grew colder the closer they got, and the sky seemed to darken with each passing day. As they traveled, they encountered creatures twisted by the darkness, beasts that had once been gentle, but were now feral and aggressive. Yasin and Layla fought them off, using their combined skills and the light within Yasin to protect themselves. The journey was exhausting, but they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that the source of the darkness lay ahead. Finally, after days of difficult travel, they reached the edge of the Shadow Valley. The valley was shrouded in a thick, unnatural fog, and the ground was barren, as if life itself had been drained from the land. The entrance to the valley was marked by towering, twisted trees that seemed to whisper warnings in the wind. Yasin and Layla stepped cautiously into the Shadow Valley, their senses heightened by the overwhelming presence of darkness. The fog was so thick that they could barely see a few feet in front of them, and the air was heavy with the scent of decay. Every sound seemed amplified, echoing eerily through the valley. As they ventured deeper, they began to feel the oppressive weight of the darkness pressing down on them, sapping their strength and will. Layla whispered an incantation to protect them, but even her powerful magic seemed weakened in this place. Yasin focused on the light within him, using it to keep the darkness at bay, but he could feel it growing stronger with each step. Despite the overwhelming odds, Yasin and Layla pushed forward, determined to reach the heart of the valley and uncover the source of the darkness. They knew that whatever awaited them at the center would be their greatest challenge yet. As they journeyed through the valley, Yasin and Layla began to encounter strange apparitions, ghosts of the past, lingering souls of those who had tried and failed to cleanse the valley. These spirits were trapped, unable to find peace, their faces twisted in sorrow and despair. One by one, the ghosts approached Yasin and Layla, pleading for help, warning them to turn back before it was too late. The sight of these lost souls filled them with sadness, but also strengthened their resolve. They knew that freeing the valley from darkness would also free these tormented spirits. Layla began to chant a prayer for the dead, offering them peace and urging them to move on. Yasin, meanwhile, used his light to guide the spirits toward the afterlife. As they did so, the spirits began to fade, their sorrowful expressions softening into one of gratitude before disappearing entirely. As they neared the center of the valley, Yasin and Layla encountered a massive ancient tree standing alone in a clearing. The tree was blackened and twisted, its roots stretching out like claws across the barren ground. At its base stood a figure clad in dark armor, the guardian of the valley, a being tasked with protecting the source of the darkness. The guardian's presence was formidable, and as it turned to face Yasin and Layla, they could feel the power radiating from it. The guardian's eyes glowed with a cold, unnatural light, and its voice was deep and resonant as it spoke. "You have come far, but this is where your journey ends," the guardian intoned. "The darkness is eternal, and those who seek to challenge it will only find death. Turn back now, and I will spare your lives." Yasin stepped forward, his voice steady as he replied, "We've come to end the darkness, not be consumed by it. We will not turn back." The Guardian's expression hardened. "So be it," it said, drawing a massive sword from its side. "Prepare to meet your fate." The battle with the Guardian was fierce and unrelenting. The creature moved with incredible speed and power, its sword strikes creating shockwaves that shook the ground. Yasin and Layla fought side by side, using their combined strength and skill to hold their ground against the formidable foe. Yasin's light clashed with the Guardian's darkness, each strike sending sparks of energy through the air. Layla's magic provided support, casting protective barriers and launching counterattacks. But despite their efforts, the Guardian seemed almost unstoppable, its power fueled by the very darkness that filled the valley. As the battle raged on, Yasin realized that brute force alone would not be enough to defeat the Guardian. They needed to find a way to weaken its connection to the darkness, to disrupt the source of its power. Yasin and Layla noticed that the Guardian's power was connected to the ancient tree at the center of the clearing. The tree's twisted roots seemed to pulse with dark energy, feeding the Guardian's strength. Yasin knew that if they could sever the tree's connection to the darkness, they might have a chance to defeat the Guardian. "Layla, focus on the tree," Yasin called out as he deflected another powerful strike from the Guardian's sword. Layla nodded, understanding his plan. She began chanting a powerful spell, directing her magic at the roots of the tree. As Layla's magic struck the tree, the ground shook violently and the roots began to writhe and crack. The Guardian let out a roar of rage, sensing the weakening of its power. Yasin seized the opportunity, using his light to drive the Guardian back, away from the tree. With one final concentrated effort, Layla's spell severed the tree's roots, breaking its connection to the darkness. The Guardian staggered, its strength rapidly fading as the source of its power was cut off. Yasin knew that this was their moment. With the Guardian weakened, he gathered all his remaining strength and summoned the full force of the light within him. The Guardian, now barely able to stand, raised its sword in a final desperate attempt to strike Yasin down. But Yasin was faster. He channeled the light into his own blade, creating a brilliant, blinding energy that cut through the darkness. With a powerful strike, Yasin brought his sword down on the Guardian, shattering its weapon and piercing its armor. The Guardian let out a final, anguished cry as it was consumed by Yasin's light. Its form disintegrated into a cloud of dark smoke, which was quickly absorbed by the ground beneath it. The twisted, ancient tree at the center of the clearing began to wither, its dark energy dissipating into the air. As the darkness retreated, the oppressive atmosphere of the Shadow Valley began to lift. The fog that had once shrouded the land cleared, and the sky above lightened, revealing the first rays of sunlight that the valley had seen in ages. The once barren and cursed land slowly started to show signs of life, with green shoots pushing up through the cracked earth. Yasin and Layla stood together, breathing heavily from the battle, but filled with a sense of triumph. They had defeated the Guardian, broken the chains of darkness that had held the valley captive, and brought light back to a place that had been lost for so long. With the Guardian defeated and the valley beginning to heal, Yasin and Layla turned their attention to the source of the darkness. Deep within the ground, beneath where the ancient tree had stood, they found a hidden chamber. The entrance was now visible, a dark stairway leading down into the earth. Yasin felt a chill as they descended the steps, Layla close behind him. They knew that the true heart of the darkness still remained, the source that had corrupted the valley and empowered the Guardian. They had come too far to turn back now. They had to see this through to the end. At the bottom of the stairs, they entered a vast underground chamber. In the center of the room was a massive black crystal, pulsing with an ominous energy. This was the source of the darkness, the core that had spread its corrupting influence throughout the valley. The black crystal radiated a malevolent force that made the air in the chamber feel heavy and suffocating. Yasin and Layla could feel the darkness trying to pull them in, but they resisted, focusing on the light and strength they had cultivated during their journey. Layla examined the crystal closely, her hands glowing with magic as she probed its surface. "This crystal is ancient, far older than anything we've encountered," she murmured. "It has absorbed centuries of darkness, feeding on the fears and despair of those it has touched. Destroying it will be no easy task." Yasin nodded, knowing that they had to be careful. "We need to weaken it first," he said. "If we attack it head-on, the darkness could overwhelm us. We have to break its connection to the valley, just as we did with the tree and the guardian." Together, they began to work on a plan. Layla used her magic to draw protective symbols on the ground, creating a barrier around the crystal to contain its power. Yasin, meanwhile, focused on the light within him, preparing to channel it into the crystal at the right moment. Layla's hands moved quickly as she chanted an ancient incantation, weaving her magic into the symbols on the ground. The chamber began to glow with a soft light, pushing back the darkness that emanated from the crystal. Yasin stood ready, feeling the power of the light growing within him. As Layla's chant reached its peak, she called out to Yasin, "Now, Yasin, focus your light on the crystal, and together we can break its hold on this land." Yasin stepped forward, raising his hands toward the crystal. He closed his eyes and concentrated, letting the light within him flow out like a river of energy. The light converged on the crystal, and for a moment, the darkness resisted, pushing back against the light. But Yasin didn't waver. He continued to pour his strength into the light, and slowly the crystal began to crack. The dark energy that had once been so powerful started to weaken, and the room filled with the sound of the crystal's surface splintering. With one final focused effort, Yasin channeled all the light he had left into the crystal. The black stone shuddered, and then shattered into 1,000 pieces, sending shards flying across the chamber. The darkness that had once filled the room was gone, replaced by a brilliant, pure light. The ground trembled as the last remnants of the darkness were absorbed into the light, leaving the chamber cleansed and peaceful. Yasin and Layla stood together, their hands still glowing with the residual energy of the ritual. They had done it. The source of the darkness had been destroyed. The chamber, once filled with malevolent energy, now felt calm and serene. The oppressive weight that had hung over the valley was lifted, and for the first time in what seemed like an eternity, Yasin and Layla could feel the true peace of the land returning. As they emerged from the underground chamber, Yasin and Layla were greeted by the sight of the valley beginning to heal. The once barren land was now showing signs of life, with green grass and wildflowers sprouting from the earth. The air was fresh and clear, and the sunlight bathed the valley in a warm, golden glow. The villagers who had once fled the valley began to return, drawn by the news that the darkness had been vanquished. They were amazed at the transformation and overjoyed to see their homeland restored. Yasin and Layla were hailed as heroes, but they humbly deflected the praise, knowing that they had simply done what was necessary to protect the land and its people. The spirits that had been trapped in the valley were also freed, their sorrow replaced with peace. They appeared to Yasin and Layla, their faces serene and grateful, before finally moving on to the afterlife. The valley, once a place of despair, was now a place of light and renewal. As the valley continued to heal, Yasin and Layla took a moment to rest and reflect on their journey. They had faced incredible challenges and had grown stronger as a result. But more than that, they had forged a bond that was unbreakable, a partnership built on trust, respect, and love. Layla looked at Yasin, her eyes filled with warmth. "We've come so far together, Yasin. I can't imagine having done this with anyone else." Yasin smiled, taking her hand in his. "Neither can I, Layla. You've been my strength, my guide, and my friend. I know that whatever comes next, we'll face it together." The two sat in companionable silence, watching as the sun set over the valley. They knew that their journey was not over, but for now, they were content to simply be, to enjoy the peace they had fought so hard to achieve. After ensuring that the valley was safe and the villagers were settled, Yasin and Layla had time to return home. They had been away for a long time, and they missed the familiarity of their village, the warmth of the people who had become their family. The journey back was filled with a sense of accomplishment and anticipation. Along the way, they passed through other villages, sharing the story of the Shadow Valley and offering their help to those in need. Each village they visited was a reminder of the impact they had made and of the strength they had gained together. When they finally reached their village, they were welcomed with open arms. The villagers had heard of their deeds and were eager to hear the full story. Yasin and Layla were happy to be home, surrounded by the people they loved. The village celebrated Yasin and Layla's return with a grand feast. The villagers prepared their best dishes, and the air was filled with the sounds of laughter and music. It was a joyous occasion, a time to celebrate not just the return of their heroes, but also the peace that had been restored to the land. Yasin and Layla shared their story, recounting the battles they had fought and the challenges they had overcome. The villagers listened in awe, grateful for the courage and strength that had protected them from the darkness. As the night wore on, Yasin and Layla found themselves surrounded by friends and family, all expressing their gratitude and admiration. It was a moment of pure happiness, a reminder of why they had undertaken their journey in the first place. With the darkness vanquished and peace restored, Yasin and Layla began to think about the future. They knew that their work was not done, that there were still people in the world who needed help, still places where the light had not yet reached. But they also knew that they needed to rest, to take time for themselves, enjoy the peace they had fought so hard to achieve. The village was their home, and they wanted to spend time with the people they loved, to build a life together. As they talked about their plans, they realized that they had both found something they hadn't expected: love. Their bond had grown deeper with each challenge they had faced, and they knew that they wanted to spend the rest of their lives together, facing whatever came their way. Yasin and Layla decided to build a home together in the village, a place where they could live in peace and happiness. They chose a spot on the edge of the village where they could see the mountains in the distance and the fields stretching out before them. Yasin and Layla's new home was a labor of love. The villagers, eager to show their appreciation, pitched in to help with the construction. They brought materials, shared their skills, and worked side by side with Yasin and Layla. It was a joyful time, filled with laughter and camaraderie, and the house quickly took shape. The home was modest but beautiful, built from the sturdy wood of the nearby forest, and adorned with the simple, elegant touches that reflected Yasin and Layla's tastes. There was a large fireplace at the heart of the home, where they could sit together on cold evenings, and a small garden where Layla could grow herbs and flowers. From the windows, they could see the village below and the mountains in the distance, a reminder of their journey and the battles they had fought together. As they laid the final stone and completed the last touches, Yasin and Layla stood back to admire their new home. It was more than just a house. It was a symbol of their love and their shared life. They had faced darkness together, and now they had built something beautiful out of the light. With their home complete, Yasin entered into village life. They became active members of the community, always willing to lend a hand or share their wisdom. The villagers often sought their advice, not just because of their heroic deeds, but because of the kindness and understanding they offered. Layla's knowledge of herbs and healing quickly became an invaluable resource, and she was often called upon to help with illnesses or injuries. Yasin, with his strength and skills, took on the role of protector. ensuring that the village remained safe from any threats, whether they came from wild animals or natural disasters. Together, they also continued to teach the younger generation about the importance of courage, kindness, and the light that each person carries within them. They held gatherings at their home, where they told stories of their adventures, always emphasizing the lessons they had learned along the way. One day, as Yasin and Layla were working in their garden, they heard the sound of familiar voices. To their delight, they saw several of their old friends from the neighboring villages arriving. People they'd met during their journey who had come to visit. The reunion was filled with joy and laughter as they shared stories and caught up on each other's lives. Their friends marveled at the home Yasin and Layla had built and were eager to hear about their new life in the village. It was a reminder of the connections they had made during their travels and of the impact they had had on the lives of others. That evening, they all gathered around the fireplace, sharing a meal and reminiscing about the adventures they had shared. It was a night filled with warmth and friendship, a testament to the bonds that had been forged through hardship and triumph. Not long after their friends had departed, Yasin and Layla received another visitor, the old hermit who had guided them to the Shadow Valley. He had heard of their return and had come to see how they were faring. The hermit, though still as wise and mysterious as ever, seemed to have softened during his time alone. He shared stories of his own travels, and Yasin and Layla listened with great interest. They had always admired his knowledge and experience, and they were grateful for the guidance he had given them. As they talked, the hermit revealed that he had sensed a great disturbance in the world's balance, something that had been resolved when Yasin and Layla defeated the darkness in the Shadow Valley. He expressed his gratitude for their bravery, acknowledging that the world was a better place because of their actions. Before he left, the hermit gave them a small carved stone as a token of his appreciation. This stone, he explained, is a symbol of balance and protection. Keep it with you, and it will remind you of the strength you possess and the light you carry within. Yasin and Layla accepted the gift with thanks, understanding its significance. The hermit's visit had reinforced their commitment to living in harmony with the world and continuing to use their strength for good. As the years passed, Yasin and Layla enjoyed a time of peace and prosperity in the village. They watched as the village grew, new families arriving and children being born. The land, once touched by darkness, flourished under their care, and the village became known as a place of light and happiness. The stories of Yasin and Layla's adventures became legends, passed down from generation to generation. But even as the stories grew, they never let themselves be caught up in the glory. They remained humble, always remembering the lessons they had learned and the challenges they had faced. They also continued to explore the world around them, though now their journeys were more about discovery and learning than battle and struggle. They sought out new knowledge, new ways to help their community, and new ways to live in harmony with the world. One day, as they were walking through the village, Yasin and Layla were approached by a group of young villagers. These were the children who had grown up listening to their stories and who now sought to learn from them directly. The young villagers were eager to train under Yasin and Layla's guidance, to learn the ways of light and courage. They wanted to be prepared to face the world's challenges, just as Yasin and Layla had done. The couple was touched by their eagerness and agreed to take them on as apprentices. Yasin began to teach them the skills of combat, the importance of strength and agility, but also the value of wisdom and restraint. Layla shared her knowledge of magic and healing, teaching them how to use their gifts to help others and protect the land. Together, they molded the young villagers into strong, capable individuals who were ready to face the world. It was a new chapter in their lives, one that brought them great joy and fulfillment. Despite the peace that had settled over the land, Yasin and Layla knew that darkness was never truly gone. One day, a messenger arrived from a distant kingdom, bringing news of a new threat. A powerful warlord had risen, gathering an army and spreading fear across the land. The messenger pleaded for their help, knowing of their reputation as protectors and heroes. Yasin and Layla listened carefully, understanding that this threat was different from the ones they had faced before. It was not rooted in ancient darkness, but in the cruelty and ambition of a man. After discussing it together, Yasin and Layla decided to answer the call. They knew that they could not turn away from those in need, and they were determined to use their skills to protect the innocent. Yasin and Layla prepared for the journey, gathering their weapons and supplies. The young villagers, now trained and ready, insisted on coming with them. They were eager to prove themselves and to fight alongside their mentor. The village held a solemn ceremony to send them off, offering prayers for their safety and success. Yasin and Layla, along with their apprentices, set out for the distant kingdom, determined to stop the warlord and bring peace to the land once more. As they traveled, they encountered other warriors and leaders who had also come to fight against the warlord. They formed alliances, strategizing and preparing for the battle ahead. Yasin and Layla's reputation had preceded them, and many were inspired by their presence, believing that with them on their side, they could not fail. The final battle was fierce and intense, fought on the plains outside the warlord's stronghold. Yasin and Layla led their forces with bravery and skill, their light shining bright against the warlord's dark forces. Their apprentices fought valiantly by their side, proving that they had learned well. The warlord, a man of great power and cruelty, faced Yasin and Layla directly. The battle between them was epic, a clash of light and dark, courage and fear. But in the end, it was Yasin's light and Layla's magic that prevailed, defeating the warlord and shattering his hold on the land. With the warlord's defeat, the kingdom was freed from his tyranny. The people rejoiced, celebrating their newfound peace. Yasin and Layla, though weary from the battle, were filled with a deep sense of satisfaction. They had once again protected the innocent and brought light to a place of darkness. As they stood together on the battlefield, watching the sun rise on a new day, they knew that their journey had come full circle. They had faced great challenges, made powerful allies, and taught the next generation to carry on their legacy. And as they returned home, hand in hand, they knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together, their love and light guiding them through whatever darkness might come.